Explained by the Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Ufology and spiritual science groups and organizations ask its explanations, Part 1.
3rd February 1953. Ufology, already mentioned, which actually is supposed to serve in the spreading of truth, will likewise be pressed in the direction of sectarianism and will gain worldwide significance in this regard. Like the religions themselves, ufology will become a religious means of power for the malicious extraterrestrial intelligences and, however, also a field of activity of deceitful and delusionally sick alleged contact persons. And in the year 1975, it will first be so far along that the study community, DUIST, Deutsche UFO-Studiengemeinschaft, which will be widely known up to that time, and which concerns itself with matters regarding extraterrestrial space vehicles and with extraterrestrial life forms, and for the first time in October 1956 will produce a newspaper, UFO Nachrichten, can be given the first pointer to their unreal direction. Through this study community on the European continent in the country you call Germany, various persons will be known up to that time who allegedly have contacts with extraterrestrial life forms. And as I have already said, the first copy of the newspaper-like text will be distributed to those interested in October of the year 1956, and in the course of the next decades will influence many humans of the Earth UFO news. We would like to prevent the issuance of this text, but that is not within the frame of what is possible for us, because through the distribution of this text, a very important task for a later time will be fulfilled. So, unfortunately, we must allow that this monthly newspaper will also be constructed on a basis which is quite especially religious. In and of itself, the publication of this text is very good, but does not convey the truth in this respect, because it operates on an especially religious basis, and, on the other hand, also allows itself to be led astray by charlatans and frauds. Thereby, through the distribution of the text, unfortunately, not only will good services be rendered over the decades, but also bad ones. The directors of this coming text are unfortunately aligned with an especially strong sectarian form, and so it will be a very hard battle to convince and to instruct them about the effective truth, whereby a result in this regard is, however, not certain. Ask its explanations, Part 2. 4th February 1953. It will also be to your advantage that by then, despite the negative religious fact, the study community I have mentioned in Germany, Deutsche UFO-Studiengemeinschaft, will have done very good and very important work, which may not be of benefit to you but to your task, so that your seed will soon bear abundant fruit. Some smaller and larger groups will already have formed all over the earth by that time, and will carry out their corresponding work in order to create enlightenment and to have the most urgent effect, even if in the process much falsehood and deceit as well as slander will be spread about you and your mission, and proofs as well as about us. Do not, however, mentally look for great help from these groups and from such organizations, etc., for as they are all half blinded to the real truth by the scheming machinations of the evil-minded extraterrestrial group, they will give you only limited help, if any. Ask its explanations, Part 3. 7th February 1953. In this time, circa 1975, you will also come into contact once again with the biggest European UFO study community, which should make an effort to spread information about our doings. From that point, you will be invited to a congress, but this will be a very great knockout for you. The organizers will not want to come to terms with the truth, because they are very strongly biased through religious sectarianism. They do not want you to spread the actual truth, so they will suddenly obstruct your path so you cannot appear at the Congress. It will be such that they do not want to acknowledge you as a new prophet because, in their aberration through religion, they are not able to recognize the truth. But the fight for the truth will be very hard because you will have to fight against the lack of understanding and lack of reason of sectarian ufological groups and so forth, who are strongly anchored in the religious and in pseudosciences. In regard to that, take note especially of the coming worldwide organization for ufological work, MUFON, because, along with various pathological know-it-alls and slanderers of truth, it will be your greatest adversary. At the beginning of the second half of the year 1975, the German ufological study community, DUIST, Deutsche UFO-Studiengemeinschaft, will lead the first strike against you. Ask its explanations, Part 6.
But your worst enemies will be the enviers and know-it-alls, as well as the extremists and the cultic circles, who will have lost every sense of reality through their false teachings. Be therefore watchful and protect yourself from them, because the worst are always those who are misled by hate, by being know-it-alls, by jealousy and fanaticism, as well as those who are misled by some sort of cults. Their thinking and behavior is at all times directed towards the demand for blood, because their minds are always distinguished by vengeance. But also protect yourself from the critics and false realists, because they also conceal great dangers within themselves. They believe that they stand above all things, but indeed they live only in their own stupid and uncomprehending world of thought. Outwardly, they speak very learnedly and want to shine greatly, but inside of themselves, they are wretched, ignorant, and full of evil rubbish.
Contact Report 007. You belong to a group of human beings who concern themselves with parascience and spiritual science. I have often endeavored around the interests of this group and have found that it's the only one in this form. You work on a very real basis and unconstrained. I have determined that other groups of the same kind unfortunately deal with things that have fallen to the unreal. They often carry out experiments that they themselves can't understand, and for which they usually search for false explanations. But this is not all that surprising, because in these groups practically only human beings are admitted who have fallen prey to a deluded belief and the irrational teachings of the religions. I congratulate your group, which is so unconstrained and real in its approach to every subject, not in mystical form as others do. You are on the right track, and keep it that way. Task Part 3. As the third part of the task, I would like to ask you to pass the following on to relevant authorities, but bearing in mind that for the time being, these cognizances are with their full implications not intended for the broad spectrum of the public. You know the path to take. It leads via Mr. Carl Veit, whom you had supplied with your contact reports. He is and remains the determinative person who shall purposively spread and transmit the news. However, in the last few days, I had to realize that Mr. Veit was very shaken after receiving the reports and was befallen by doubts. Unfortunately, he is also bound by things that are religious. This is due to the fault of certain alleged contact persons who were able to influence him cheatingly. Even his closest relatives and countless friends have thereby been affected. Nevertheless, Mr. Veit will have to triumph over himself and acknowledge the truth. His rationality will have to triumph, for his sense asks for it. It is at your discretion whether you want to tell Mr. Veit my comments in this regard, which would, however, be appropriate. He is known to us as an honest-thinking and honest-acting human being, and he appreciates honest openness. Therefore, as the most rational one of all in terms of spreading the truth, I have also mentioned his name to you, even though, for reasons known to you, we cannot enter into personal contact with him. But you should stand between him and us as intermediary in the sense that you convey our messages to him, and he takes their appropriate spreading to hand, because they are very important and of great significance.
Contact Report 015.
There are probably still very many groups that deal with similar things as you, Billy, do, but the majority of these groups represent dishonest factors, which are detrimental to the real truth. In many cases, they indulge in unbelievably illogical fantasies, which are devoid of all truth and reality. They live in false belief assumptions and false, eternally unprovable, lasting illusions, which are alien to all reality and truth. Among them, or in them, though, are also many conscious and unconscious deceivers. You should beware of all of them, for they could be very dangerous to you. Their influence in certain authoritative circles is often very great, which would be good for themselves, but not for you. There are already certain current and future circles and persons who would like to get possession of the material at your disposal and who do not disregard even evil intrigues, lies, and calumnies for this purpose.
Contact Report 031.
Unfortunately, however, it is precisely the truth that is often twisted by religious sectarians and fantasists and evaluated in their own favor. That is why there are also various groups that are supposedly concerned with the enlightenment of things with us and our ships, but who in reality only use this as a pretext to consolidate and spread their religious sectarianism in order to thereby beat the world even worse into religious bondage.
Contact Report 033.
For about 2 decades, these events, which so far remain inexplicable for the terrestrial human beings, were additionally exploited in other forms by certain religiously dependent and unclearly working groups of ufologists who attributed the events to extraterrestrials. For them, these events were a found meal to feed credulous individuals with untrue and dishonest statements by inventing fantastically dark, satanic extraterrestrial powers, which are supposed to be responsible for the events in the Bermuda Triangle. What could be more obvious in terms of religion than this measure because, like the unreal religions themselves, ufology had to have the form of a Satan in order to keep its believers in check. Since ufology was built on a religious basis and only functions in this form, it inevitably had to create 2 powers in this respect, namely good and bad, black and white, divine and satanic.
Contact Report 044.
Certainly, but for now you really should not bother about the Deist anymore. Note: Deutsche UFO-Studiengemeinschaft, Wiesbaden, West Germany, Karl L. Veit and Annie Veit, Publishers of UFO-Nachrichten, 1956, To 1995. Only in much later time will you be given this task again, which cannot yet be described as certain, because we have come across many negative things with the Deist in the meantime. For the time being, however, you have nothing to do with it, at least not so long as the couple Veit is still leading this community. Soon, however, this will no longer be the case. Then perhaps everything will look completely different. It is to be hoped that no more people will take over the leadership of the Deist, who are so much trapped and enslaved in fanatical religious concerns, as is the case with the present leadership.
Contact Report 064.
I do not want to talk about the broad mass of humankind, but about the public sphere of the ufological circles, in which certain idiots want to be omniscient.
On the other hand, it is understandable to me if you react in this way, because your realization makes you angry that those who want to be knowing are very ignorant and autocratic in their assumptions and their quite illogical assertions. This is because you see that the way to truth remains very difficult to access for Earth humans. You have quite rightly recognized that it is the so-called ufological circles and communities themselves that make our existence questionable and cast doubt on it. For it is these circles that are guilty of making our existence laughable in the worldwide public arena and that are today being decried as fantasy and hallucination. This does not mean that all groups work in this manner, but most do. In their lack of understanding and in their ignorance, the erroneously lead ones seek fantastic explanations in technological, paranormal, and purely intellectual areas, whereby the most impossible hypotheses are presented, and indeed also in the form that we are angels and God's messengers, or that we come in evil and world conquering, as well as with Earth-human abduction, intentions, etc., which of course all corresponds to evil nonsense. In the main, these erroneously lead ones deal with purely sectarian and esoteric parapsychological deficiencies, as well as with the technical possibilities and construction methods of our ships, whereas they completely disregard our important task itself and the associated values and have no idea of it. This is typical for the human being of the Earth, because he or she always reaches only for the material and completely overlooks the fundamental values, namely the spiritual and consciousness-based ones, about which he or she then makes up unbelievable fantasies and even claims that jet ships and spaceships, etc., are driven by spiritual forces and that they are also built according to spiritual models, etc. This is as malicious a misleading claim as the one that we were moving in paranormal realms. The greatest nonsense in this direction is created by those circles, which they call parapsychology circles, etc., which deal with those things and concerns which are incomprehensible to them and which are not understood in the least. And it is precisely these circles that do the most malicious and misleading subversive activities in order to hinder and prevent the finding of the truth, which is only surpassed by those who are supposedly engaged in the purely material form of semi-scientific and fully scientific investigation of the possible existence of our flying machines and ourselves. But their actions are only a delusion, because in reality they are possessed by illogicalness and are still trapped in very material, earthly, and misleading forms of thinking, whereby they are unable to gain any knowledge and accuse anything and everything incomprehensible to them as lies and deception, whereby they feel very great and feel a megalomaniac satisfaction in themselves. This sort also includes Coleman Stephen von Kavitsky you mentioned, whose stupidity and primitiveness you should not get excited about, and who has no spiritual stable value of any kind, nor any knowledge of us, nor do those who still move in hierarchical or religiously and sectarian recognizing realms and claim that we simply do not know about these things. An assertion that only testifies to the small-mindedness of these people who have not yet recognized themselves and do not possess any real concepts of reality and truth.
You are not saying anything to me that I have not known myself for a long time. For my part, however, I thought that the time was now really ripe to be able to bring the truth to certain circles, which is why we also endeavored to publish articles in public publications, etc., which was not good. However, because that brought into play those super-ufologists who arrogantly and from their own blessedness call themselves scientific researchers, but who in reality are more ignorant and primitive than complete idiots.
This results in the fact that the Earth human today is not yet capable of dedicating himself or herself to our concerns regarding us and our ship's existence in honest, open, and real form. These so-called ufologists, who were meant to spread the truth and pave the way for the coming of extraterrestrial intelligences, have degraded themselves to primitive semi-scientific sects and spread their unintelligent and dirty nonsense of self-created theories and lies, thereby distancing the Earth humans further and further from the truth on a global level instead of leading them towards the truth. This fact shows that the Earth human does not yet have enough real and truly knowing powers to prepare for the coming of extraterrestrial intelligences by a purposeful elucidation. The realization from this is that the assumed development, with regard to a real elucidation, was only a deception according to purely outwardly falsified facts, and that it consequently results in a new probability calculation on our part that the terrestrial human will presumably only be far enough along in approx. 200 to 300 or even more years to attain the knowledge of the existence of extraterrestrial human life forms when they begin to travel into space beyond the solar system in manned spaceflight with highly developed technology, or if extraterrestrial intelligences appear in official form on the Earth. This means that the planned official landing shortly before the year 2000 will be virtually impossible, and we will make every effort to ensure that it does not take place. This, in any case, is the first result of the cognitions obtained, for which the Earth human can pay tribute to those malignant forces who dress in names such as Hans Jacob, Mario Bertossi, Michael Arends, Duist, Deutsche UFO Studiengesellschaft, and von Kavitsky, but also to many others who are unknown to you by name. It is the fault of all of them that the Earth human must continue to live in consciousness-based and truthful darkness, for it is our decision that you and your group should only be active in truth-spreading in honest, searching and knowing groups, thus in lectures, the dissemination of the writings and other educational and teaching work, for only in this way will the ancient determinations be fulfilled, that a center be built for it, and you trigger a worldwide controversy through which the fact of the Earth visits of extraterrestrial intelligences, and especially our existence and task, become known.
Contact Report 866 Tar wiretapped. In Hinwil. When the first contacts with my daughter Simyase took place, it was recorded by her. As a result of facts that had taken place, that very serious attempts were made by various sectarians to persuade Billy to persuade us Pleeran to testify and admit that we were God's messengers and should therefore bring certain earthly persons to error in order to be able to live in the kingdom of God itself and with Jesus Christ. The first persons to appear in this way were Anna and Carl Veit, who were connected with the press organ UFO News and who also made personal representations to Billy, as did various other persons. In the course of all the years since contact was established, our permanent records have so far registered 41 incidents of this kind, whereby without exception requests were made to be allowed to contact us, or to be taken to our world, as was apparently the case with Anna and Carl Veit for fanatical religious reasons.